नमस्ते। अहम् आशां करोमि यत् गतवर्गस्य वर्णानां परिचयः भवद्भिः सम्यक् प्राप्तमस्ति, बहु अभ्यासः च कृतः। तस्य फलेन कस्य वर्णस्य कुत्र उच्चारणं भवति तद्विषये इतोपि भवन्तः किञ्चित् जागरूकाः जाताः स्युः इति मम आशा अस्ति। So namaste, and I sincerely hope that you familiarized yourself a little more with the place of pronunciations that we had presented to you in the previous class, and that you are a little aware of the different factors that are playing in when you are trying to utter the Sanskrit letters. So in today's lecture, which is the second one from module 3, it's the revision, the module 3 itself is dealing with the revision of the Varnamala, the Upasargaha and the Sandhis. And in lecture 8, we will be looking at a revision of the Upasargaha and their applications. So here we'll do a revision of the general information on the Upasargaha, because we have already introduced this to you in the intermediate course. But idanim itopi kinchid gabhirataya tatra pravishamaha. Tatra there will be also the functions, or the 3 functions of the Upasargas, and then we are going to look at certain characteristics of Upasargas and what they do to the words they attach themselves with. The Upasargas are the prefixes that we have been looking at earlier on as well. And then there is a verse on remembering the different Upasargas. And then we look at the Upasargas and their meanings, and you will see that they are not just assigned a single meaning, but they can have quite a variety and sometimes even contradictory. So it's quite an interesting relationship with meaning. And then we look at how the Upasargas change the meaning of verbs. And then we'll do a conversation for practice with Piyush, and hope that that will help to build your vocabulary. Finally, we will do a few verses related to Shaucham, which is the next quality that we are looking at as we try and understand what Dharma is all about. And finally, we'll end with Swami Vivekananda's quotes on Shaucham. So here's some general information about Upasargaha. Tari kati Upasargaha santi? Samanyataya tatra vimshati Upasargaha santi iti uchyate. Kadachit tatra Upasarga dvayam api yojayanti. Vayam anantaram drakshama ke santi te Upasargaha. So there are about 20 Upasargas or prefixes, and you can also add 2 more as we will see later on. And about the naming of this Upasargas and the different words that are used thereby. So according to the Sutra, which is Pradayah, so it is the Prathama chapter, the 4th pada and the 58th sutra. So in that it is known as the Avyaya. Each of these combinations that we'll be looking at, these letter combinations we'll be looking at, are known as Avyayam or Nipata in general. But they can also be combined with the nouns as we see here. So you've got Supurushaha, which means a good person, and Pranayakaha, ityukte, a retired hero. But according to the sutra, which is Upasargaha Kriya Yoge, which is the next sutra, Navapanchashattama. So it's the 59th sutra. It is called the Upasargaha when it is combined with a verb or a dhatu and modifies its meaning. Ataha Upasargaha Kriya Yoge. For example, we see you have the word hr, to remove. So you have aharaha, which means food, pariharaha, which means liberation and many other things. It can also mean finding a solution to a problem. Sangharaha is destruction, and praharaha means to assault. So we talked about this in the previous lecture when we looked at the kind of intrinsic experiential meaning that is given to the sounds. And there you can almost feel it, like the sum has a kind of an integral kind of a feel about it. Pra has a very strong forward going kind of a feel to it. Iti. And then you combine it with the verbs and you arrive at very different meanings with them. So let's look at 3 functions of the Upasargaha. So the primary role that it plays is to change the meaning of the dhatus or the root verb. Yatha atra asti gacchati ityukte, goes or is going. Kimartham, I have given you both forms because in the English language, the Vartamana Kala or the Lat Lakara is equivalent to the simple present tense as well as the present continuous. Ataha atra rupa dvayam aham dattavati. Tari gachati goes or is going. Agachati. You remember the you did with your hands open. So has a sense of towards you. So agachati is to come. So comes or is coming. Avagachati, it enters, which means to understand or is understands or is understanding. And then you've got the second kind of a function, which means that it retains the meaning of the dhatu or the root verb. Yatha vasati, lives or is living, and then adhivasati, so dwells is dwelling. There is a little more force with when you sing adhivasati, but the same meaning, it doesn't change it significantly. Then you have the fact that it enhances the meaning of the dhatu or the root verb. Yatha namati, salutes or is saluting. Pranamati, salutes further, is saluting further or more deeply. So let's look at some further characteristics of the upasargas. So one of the things that it does is that it also sometimes changes the verb from parasmaipadi to atmanepadi when you conjugate it, and vice versa. Tari atra udaharanam pashyama. According to the sutra Viparabhyam Jehe, which is the Prathama Adhyaya, Tritiya Pada and the Navadashama Sutram. Tatra Tadvadati, it converts the verb from Parasmaipadi to Atmanepadi. Yatha Jayati, which means wins, and Parajayate, it not only means loses but it also changes it from Ti to Te. Astu. Punaha Anyadapi ek atra udaharanam asti, which is the reverse case. According to Sutra Vyang Paribhyo Ramaha, which is the Prathama Adhyaya, Tritiya Pada and the 83rd Sutra, this one says that you have to convert it from Atmanepadi to Parasmaipadi. Ekam udaharanam atra asti, yatha ramate means to enjoy and viramati means to rest. Iti. Astu. Tari etam shlokam pashyama, which is one of those shlokas to help us remember the upasarga forms. So I'm going to read it out slowly and steadily because it's something that needs, it's a bit like a tongue twister a little bit. Astu. Tari praparapasamanvavanir dur abhivyadhisudaniti pratiparyapayaha upangiti vinshatiresha sakhe upasarga vidhi kathitah kavina. Astu. Etat supadma vyakarane milati. So let's look at the different upasargas that are listed out here. There is pra, para, apa, sam, anu. So we see atra kutra kutra bhavati. Ava, nihi, nir, dur, abhi, vi, adhi, su, ud, ati, ni, prati, pari, api, which becomes apayaha when it does the samasta form of all the prepositions or upasargas together. And then you've got upa, ang. Ang actually is the form of a, and iti, and that becomes angiti. Vimshatireshaha sakhe upasarga vidhihi kathitaha. Okay, kavina. So the poet, this is a poet, not even a grammarian. This is a poet who is talking of the different upasargas. Now, etad atirichya, so atra vimshati upasargaha dattaha santi etasmin shloke, tad vihaya atiriktau dvau upasargau staha nis and dus. Etad ashtadhyayam milati. Tari agre pachyama. Atra in fact ekam uttama kim vadama abhyasam kartum shaknuvanti sandhim upayujya. Tari, once you've done the sandhi a little more confident, come back to the shloka and see where all you can identify. Now that the form is given, katham you can find the sandhis in the shloka itself. It will be a fun exercise to do. Agre gachhama. Tari atra upasarga and the basic meaning. Tari prathamika artha karanam bahu artha santi. Yada shabda kalpa drumam pashyanti pratyeka upasargasya tatra bahava arthaha dattaha santi. Atra maya kechit eva chitaha santi, and here also there is a little bit of a challenge because of the translation that we are doing from Sanskrit into English. Astu. So pashyama, ati, so praise or beyond, over, excess, impossibility, ityadi arthaha santi. Adhi, upper portion, above, over, authority, lordship, adhi. Okay, so adhikaraha, for example, you see that. Okay, ati vyaptihi, spread all over the place. Adhikaraha, the courage, that or the right to do something. Very interesting the way the word adhikara doesn't so much imply the right as we normally use it, but the word adhikara also implies one has to merit it. You have to be deserving of an adhikara that you get. Astu. Next, anu. So it means after, similarity, repetition, along, near, order. Very anuvadaha or anugachati, follow, that we have looked at earlier. Then apagachati, move away from, okay, lack of, away from, giving up, separation, etc. Anantaram api, so close to, censure, less, doubt, permission, iti, ityadi asti. Huh? Then abhi, so you've got abhimanyu, you know, that the name that we have. So it means towards, desire to pervade, repetition. Okay. Then avatarati, to step down, to go down. So down, downward, disrespect, support. You see, there are sometimes quite contradictory meanings, but in order to really understand how this can coexist, one would really need to spend a lot of time doing a psychological analysis of the implication of all these upasargas. Next, ang or a. So here, near, towards, one, etc. Then you've got ud, upwards. So ut, like uttamam, that comes from here. Uttamam, toppest it means. Okay. So it is up, upwards, nearness, forceful, beneficial. Then Upanishad. So upa, next to, under, less, spread, primacy. And then dur is forbidding, sorrow, criticism, duracharaha. So you see that you have that. So criticism, blame, etc. Then you got dus, so bad, difficult, sadness, anger. So dus can also, I think, you can have the word dukkha, I think comes from dus, which becomes duh, and then it means sorrow. Then ni, upanishad. You see, you've got a double prefix there. Then ni, into, forbidding, closeness, abode. In Upanishad, it's the closeness component that is there. Nir, which is decision, forbidding, absence. Yatha bhavati saha nirakaroti. When he says don't do this, nirakaroti, forbids. And then nis, okay, nissandeha, you have that word, without any doubt. Decision, forbidding, whole, past, again a variety. Then we've got para, which means far away, gone, movement, killing. So then we've got pari. Pari means pari means, it means around, about, sorrow, excess. Okay, so paribhramati means going round and round. Then pra, forward, primacy, fame, birth, and we find there are many of these prefixes that we also recognize in the English language, like progress. So that comes from pra, okay, moving forward. Peri, comes from pari. Astu. So there are many words that you will be able to identify if you think of this a little more deeply. Prati, backwards, against, towards. Prati gacchati, goes back towards. Vi has a whole range. It can be a focused thing, or it can be a vastening. So you've got apart, separate, support, focus, cause, all of that. Vijnanam, which means very specific application of knowledge. Some, together, complete. Sangachadhvam, samvadadhvam. Fabulous verse. The last verse of the Rig Veda. Yatra savadati sangachadhvam. Walk together. Samvadadhvam. Speak together. Samvo manansi janatam. Know each other's minds together. And then it continues, but it's a verse that is really calling all of humanity to come together, think together, walk together, because a common home. Vasudhaiva kutumbakam anyatra gamanam nasti. Esha prithvi nashta bhavati vayam tatra vinashtaha bhavamaha. So we need to all work together. And so the entire Rig Veda ends with this particular mantra, which is this call for unity and working in collaboration. And then we have Su. Good, easy, permission, worship. And my favorite is, of course, Sukha, which means excellent spaces. So what does that mean? A lot of psychology that can unfold in terms of how to practically pave one's way for excellent spaces and experience happiness thereby. So let's look at how the upasargas can change the root verbs themselves. So atra gacchati iti dhatu asti, gam moola dhatu. Kim bhavati atra agacchati, comes. Adhigacchati, to acquire, obtain, etc. Anugacchati, follow. Apagacchati, upper, away, so goes away. avagachati, it comes in, so you understand. Then udgachati, so udgachati, so rises up. Upagachati, go close. Nirgachati, so go away, exit. Pratigachati, go back, iti. Namaste Piyusha.
प्रणामः आर्ये.
कुतः प्रसन्नः दृश्यसे? का विशेषा वार्ता अस्ति?
अद्य अहम् आनन्दितः अस्मि यतः मम मित्रम् अत्र आगच्छति.
उत्तमवार्ता. सः किमर्थम् आगच्छति? अहम् अशृण्वं यत् कश्चन गुरुः नगरम् आगतवान् इति. सः किं तम् अनुसरति, अनुगच्छति वा?
आम् आर्ये, सः ताम् एकं वारम् उपगत्य वा स्वसाधनायाः विषयं स्वजीवनविषयं च अवगन्तुम् इच्छति, अतः आगच्छति.
अस्तु, सतां सङ्गेन तस्य गुरोः आशीर्वादैः यदि तस्य दुर्गुणाः अपगच्छन्ति, सदाचाराः च अधिगच्छन्ति, महान् सौभाग्यशाली भविष्यति. गुरोः उपदेशानुसारं यदि सः गङ्गायाः उद्भवस्थाने अथवा उद्गमस्थाने ध्यानादिकं कर्तुं शक्नोति, लाभान्वितः भविष्यति एव. अस्तु, त्वं किं करिष्यसि? सरस्वती पूजा आगच्छति, गृहं गमिष्यसि किम्?
आम् आम् आर्ये, सः यदा यानेन अस्माकं ग्रामं प्रति गमिष्यति तदा अहं दोलया सह इतः निर्गमिष्यामि इति चिन्तयामि. एकवारं गृहं गत्वा आगच्छामि किम् आर्ये?
अवश्यं. गृहे निश्चयेन पितरौ मम नमस्कारान् ज्ञापय. अस्तु, तर्हि शुभयात्रा.
पुनर्मिलामः.
पुनर्मिलामः. So as we move on to the next section, which is on the verse on related to the concept of dharma, we've already seen this, but let's say it all together now. Astu, tari maya saha vadatu asmin vare. Kshama satyam dama shaucham danamindriya sanyamaha ahimsa guru shushrusha tirthanusaranam daya arjavam lobha shunyatvam deva brahmana pujanam anabhyasuya cha tatha dharma samanya uchyate iti, from the Vishnu Puranam. So let's look at the next quality, which is shaucham. Atra eka samanya lakshanam asti. So what is the usual general definition? Shuchehe bhavaha karma va shaucham. Shaucham is an action or process or skill of being clean, but bhava is more the feeling. It's the process. It's the way of. It's the state of being clean, and this is in the Shabda Kalpadrumaha. So, abhakshya pariharastu sansargaschapya ninditahi swadharme cha vyavasthanam shauchametat prakirtitam. So, what more about shaucha? So, this is in the Brihaspati Vachanam. The Ekadashi Tattvam found in the Shabda Kalpadrumaha. So atra saha vadati abhakshya pariharastu. So abhakshya parihara means abstaining from bad food, and there is a description of what all comes under the category of bad food, etc. And then also it includes things like drinks and also smoking, drinking alcohol, taking drugs, the food and drinks banned by the cultures and nations. Alright, so things that are not healthy for the individual. And then sansargaschapyaninditahi. So sansargaha cha api aninditahi. The abstinence of these is even recommended by the doctors for one's health. That's for the food. Now aninditahi samsargaha. So which means keeping in touch with virtuous people and not sinful ones. So here we've got ninditaha means those who are criticized, etc. And aninditahi means with those who are not criticized. So to keep company of those who are not criticizable almost means who have an immaculate reputation. So with these kind of people one needs to be engaging with and interacting with. Swadharme cha vyavasthanam. So one has to be established in one's own dharma, and this means to perform one's own dharma or duty. These three are called shaucham. So agre gachhama. These are two classifications of shaucham. Kim asti atra? Shauchan tu dvividham proktam bahyam abhyantaram tatha mrijjalabhyam smritam bahyam bhavashuddhir athantaram. So what are the two kinds of shauchams? So there is largely a bahya shaucham and an abhyantara shaucham. And we've seen, this is a definition that's given in the, or rather a classification given in the Garuda Puranam in the 215th adhyaya. So you can imagine that is 215th chapter itself. So we can just begin to wonder at the size of that work. And this is given as a reference in the Shabda Kalpadhruma. So just for your information, Shabda Kalpadhruma can also be found as a WhatsApp, as an app on your phone. So see if you can download that, and it's a terrific resource to avail of different meanings of words, a very rich resource, and it also gives you the references where all you can find those words. Astu, there are two kinds of shaucham, kim kim asti, bahyam, abhyantaram cha. The two kinds of purifications are spoken of, bahyam or external, or the physical purification with earth and water. There are in fact at least 5 to 7 kinds of baths that you can take, including air, including mantra. It's very interesting. And then there is the abhyantara, or the internal purification, or purification of thoughts and emotions. So when we talk of shuchi or shaucham, we are referring to this integral purification of the being, not one at the cost of the other. Astu. There is a verse, there is a quote here by Swamiji where he says, "One man who has purified himself thoroughly accomplishes more than a regiment of preachers. Out of purity and silence comes the word of power." So to conclude with another verse from Swamiji, where he says the power of shaucham, he talks about the power of shaucham or purity. He says, "You must be perfectly pure. Do not think of evil things. Such thoughts will surely drag you down. If you are perfectly pure and practice faithfully, your mind can finally be made a searchlight of infinite power. There is no limit to its scope, but there must be constant practice and non-attachment to the world. When a man reaches the superconscious state, all feeling of body melts away. Then alone does he become free and immortal. To all external appearances, unconsciousness and superconsciousness are the same, but they differ as a lump of clay from a lump of gold. The one whose soul is given up to God has reached the superconscious plane." And this is on the website Vivekavani, where they talk of concentration from Swamiji's perspective. So coming back to this concept of dharma and the relationship of purity, because dharma demands that we understand what the ideals are and are able to implement it in our lives. Very often we go astray from that which we know is right because of our various kinds of impurities, preferences and aversions, etc., which in the Yoga Sutra they talk of as the kleshas. Ataha yadi vayam dharmam acharitum ichhama tarhi tatra shuchehe mahatvam yogadanam bhavati. So the role of shuchihi in our lives is very important to allow us to perceive what is the ideal and try and practice it without getting distracted by things that are debasing of human nature rather than elevating. Bahu dhanyavadaha. Asham karomi yat upasarganam pathanena yushmakam itopi tesham gunanam parichayah jatah syat. I hope you become a little more familiar with the application and use of the upasargas. And in these verses, I'm not now going into all the sandhis as yet, because I'd love you to look back on these lectures, and once we've looked at the sandhis in greater detail, that will follow shortly, you should come back and see if you're able to do the sandhi vicheda and also the karaka. So how are you able to lay out the anvaya forms, so the prose forms of these verses by yourselves. Iti asham kritva atra viramami. Sanskritam vadantu, upasarganam abhyasam kurvantu, anandena sanskritasya pathanam cha kurvantu. Namaste.